Hello, our topic is Black Moon Lilith, and we're going to discuss what it is astronomically. What is it in the sky? And this is going to take us into some very interesting ideas in astronomy and some ideas that I have not covered before. And I've made a lot of videos on the astronomy behind astrology, but we're going to cover some new things in order to understand what Black Moon Lilith is. There's a lot of material. I have a feeling this may take about 2 videos. We'll see how long it takes. And at the end, I will discuss some of what the astronomy implies about what Black Moon Lilith might mean astrologically and other ideas about it and my observations so far. But first, let's get into the astronomy. What exactly is Black Moon Lilith? Well, first thing is you can put it in your chart wheel. So here we are in the Series 3.0 software. We're looking at a chart wheel, and you'll see over here this glyph here with a T. That's the true Black Moon Lilith, and over here is the mean Black Moon Lilith. So first thing is there's a true Black Moon Lilith and a mean Black Moon Lilith. And if I right click on the wheel and I click on customize, here is the Lilith. Now here in this selection, if I check it, it disappears. If I uncheck it, I mean, and if I re-click it, they pop back in again. There are many different Liliths, and here it just says Lilith, but the Lilith referred to here is the most commonly used Lilith today, which is the Black Moon Lilith. There's also an asteroid called Lilith. There are also hypothetical objects, and those objects that astronomers have not seen yet, but people have hypothesized exist, that are also called Lilith. People have suspected that there might be like a second moon, and they call that Lilith. But the Black Moon Lilith, it is not a physical thing out there. It's not a minor planet or an asteroid. It's not a hypothetical planet, in other words, something that astrologers or other people think is out there, even though astronomers have never seen it. It's a point in space. So what are some other points in space? The ascendant. The ascendant isn't a physical body. The zero Aries point in both the sidereal and tropical zodiac. I mean, some people say there's a star there, but the star isn't triggering the sidereal zodiac. Anyway, the points, the 10th house cusp, all the house cusps are points in space. The north node and south node of the moon, and all the planets have nodes. So in astrology, there are a lot of points in space that we think are important. And Black Moon Lilith is another example of that. And you know that some of these points in space have a mean position and a true position. For example, the north node there's a mean north node and a true north node. And we get the same idea with Black Moon Lilith. Now I'm going to explain what this point in space is. Also, we're going to find out that this term true Black Moon Lilith is actually a bit of a misnomer. We probably shouldn't call it true. I think it's fine that we call it true, technically speaking. There are other terms for it. We'll get to that. But the terminology we use is a true Black Moon Lilith and a mean Black Moon Lilith. And after you check it here on this planets tab in the customizing, over here you select what Lilith you want. Do you want mean, true, or both? I put both of them in there for teaching purposes. And some people interpret both and they want it in their chart wheels. But I put it in there so that we could see them. And in this particular chart wheel, which I'm doing for today, I happen to be making this video on September 15, 2021. They're pretty far apart. 11 degrees, a little over 11 degrees. They can go out, I think 15 degrees, sometimes even a little bit more than that. So they can vary from each other. And the mean Lilith, as you might expect, moves at a constant speed, almost constant. I mean, a fairly even speed, almost perfectly constant. around. It's kind of like the sun and moon, which tend to move at about the same speed. And the true one, it'll sometimes be behind the mean Lilith and sometimes ahead of it. Okay, so that's how you put it in a chart wheel, and a lot of people interpret it. Often related, often given some kind of a lunar quality. Some people look at it as kind of like a dark, mysterious moon, very passionate, powerful, different ideas about it. But what is it? And describing what it is not trivial. So we're going to take some time to do this. Okay, let's get into what Black Moon Lilith is. Okay. The Black Moon Lilith is two things simultaneously, okay, which is fascinating. It's actually two things that overlap. So you can, okay, we'll get to it. But first thing we need to know is about orbits. It has to do with the moon's orbit around the Earth. And when a planet is orbiting another object, it orbits in an ellipse. We all know about this. Here's an ellipse, this kind of egg-shaped thing. This is an image of a planet going around the sun in an elliptical orbit. Whenever an object is traveling around another object, it always does it in an elliptical path. So the moon, of course, is going around the Earth. Is it also in an elliptical path? Yes. Everything, the interesting thing is, like, just about everything in the sky is moving and moving around something in an elliptical path. So the Earth is going around the sun and the moon is going around the Earth, both in elliptical paths. And as you probably know, within an ellipse is like a circle that's squashed, and there are two focus points of the ellipse. And the fascinating thing, if we think about, for example, suppose this red dot is the Earth. It could be any planet. Let's say it's the Earth going around the sun. Where is the sun? It's not in the center of the ellipse. It's at one of these focus points. These focus points are defined mathematically. We don't have to be concerned about getting into the technical details of the mathematics behind this. But the fascinating thing is that there's, you could say, a sacred geometry behind the universe. There's this abstract, perfect geometry. You take a circle, you squash it, which makes an ellipse, and then mathematically there's a way to define these 2 points. And guess what is at one of those points? The sun. Now, fascinating thing is this other point. It's almost like a random possibility that the sun ended up at this point. Well, what the heck is at this other point? It's another focal point. There's nothing there, but it's kind of fascinating. This is related to Black Moon Lilith. We'll come back to this. First, we need to just talk about what the orbits are so we can fully appreciate what Black Moon Lilith is. Okay, so to summarize, the Earth goes around the sun and other planets, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, etc., all going around the sun. They're all traveling in elliptical orbits, and the sun is at the focal point. One of the two focal points of that ellipse is the sun. And another thing to be aware of is that each planet is squashed differently. By squashed, I mean how skinny is this egg shape? Some orbits are almost perfectly round. Some are very, very compressed. And when it gets compressed, very long and narrow, the focal point moves farther and farther away from the center. It kind of makes sense. So this path that we're looking at is very long and narrow, relatively speaking. We call that the eccentricity. Eccentricity. Ec means away. Centric in this case means circle. How far is the egg from being a circle? If an orbit has low eccentricity, it means it's almost perfectly circular. If an orbit is highly eccentric, it means it's very long and narrow. And of course, it's relative. So some planets have low eccentricity, and some other planets have a high eccentricity. It happens, in case you're curious and you're not familiar with this, the Earth going around the sun has very low eccentricity. The Earth travels around the sun close to being a circle. It's not a circle, it's an ellipse, but only, you could say, squashed a little bit. And what about the moon going around the Earth? It's also a pretty small eccentricity, close to being round. Okay, let's read our notes here. Black Moon Lilith is the point in the moon's path where it is farthest from the Earth. So that's what it is. This diagram is for a planet going around the sun. And again, let's assume this red dot is the Earth. There's a point where the Earth is farthest from the sun, over here on the right side. And that's called the aphelion. A means away, helion means sun, farthest away from the sun. So when the Earth is here once a year, and I think that's around, let's see, farthest away on July 3rd, I believe, somewhere around then. This Earth is at aphelion. Am I getting that right? I think so. And then January 3rd, I believe, around January 3rd is when the Earth is at perihelion. I should have looked that up if I'm going to talk about it. But anyway, the Earth goes around the sun once a year, and at a certain time of year, the Earth will be at its aphelion, and a half year later, it'll be at the perihelion. Para means close to, so it's the closest point to the sun. Now, imagine this image as the moon. Let's make the red dot the moon, and this yellow, instead of being the sun, is the Earth. The diagram is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the terminology, because it's no longer closest to helion, Helios, the sun. It's closest to the Earth. And we use the phrase G, G-E-E, like G or G. And it's called perigee. So when the moon, as it travels around the Earth once a month, when it gets to this point, it's at perigee. And when it gets to this point, it's apogee. So it makes sense. Sometimes when people are first learning this, they get a little bit confused about the terminology. So, very simple. Aphelion, farthest away from the sun. That would be a planet going around the sun. Apogee is the moon, when the moon is farthest away from the Earth. So what is Black Moon Lilith? It's simply the apogee. So if this was, again, if this red thing is the red circle is the moon, and the yellow is the Earth. If this is moon going around the Earth, this point on the right is going to be apogee, and that is Black Moon Lilith. Now, I said this is going to be complicated, probably take 2 videos, maybe an hour to explain. I just explained it, but there's more involved, as you might have guessed. But that's the basic principle. Is what is Black Moon Lilith? It's the apogee, the point where the moon is farthest from the Earth. We're going to see this gets a little more involved than just that, but that's still true. It's still true. It's just, well, we'll see. But that definition is true. The Black Moon Lilith is simply the apogee of the moon. Okay, now going on to our next slide. And as I mentioned, I'm just reading my notes here because I don't want to miss anything. This is an eccentric orbit. Most orbits, well, I don't want to say most. Planets in our solar system tend to have smaller eccentricities, or closer to being round. As you might know, which object do astrologers consider to be a planet that's very eccentric is Pluto. Pluto has a very long and narrow path, highly eccentric. Mercury's orbit is a little more eccentric than some of the others, but Pluto's is really, really eccentric. And by the way, what that means also is that when the orbit is highly eccentric, like this orbit we're looking at is eccentric, the planet speeds up when it gets close, when it's at perihelion. The planet speeds up when it's at perihelion and slows down when it's at aphelion. That's just what it does. So it'll speed up and then slow down and speed up and slow down. So the smaller the eccentricity, the more constant the speed is. So you know that in astrology, we know that the speed of the sun, it's actually we call it apparent speed. It looks like the sun is moving. It's actually Earth is moving. But anyway, the speed of the sun, we know in astrology is always about 1 degree a day. It varies from about 57 minutes, which is close to being 1 degree, to about 1 degree 1 minute. It varies a little bit. Why does it vary just a little bit? Because the Earth's orbit around the sun has low eccentricity, so the speed of the Earth in revolving around the sun changes, but not tremendously, because the eccentricity is small. Okay, now let's let me read this one thing again. The moon's path has low eccentricity. The Earth also has low eccentricity. So what that also tells us that instead of what we see here, where the sun is very far from the center of the ellipse, what happens with the Earth going around the sun is very close to the center, and when the moon going around the Earth is very close to the center. Right? We already talked about this. So the moon has low eccentricity, and that means it's almost round, which means that the Earth is going to be close to the center, and here it is. Okay, this diagram on the right side has a lot of information, and let's go over it. I've already introduced a lot of this. I drew this to scale because I wanted to actually visualize what's going on, and what I did is I just used the simple paint program that comes with Windows. For every 1,000 meters, I made that 1 pixel. So in my image that I was drawing, so if you Google information about the path of the moon around the Earth, it will tell you that the distance of Earth from perigee is about 363,000 kilometers. So I made it 363 pixels. And it says, you can look it up, it'll tell us that the distance of the Earth to the moon's apogee is 405,400 kilometers. So I made it 405 pixels, and that is what it is. And I also made this circle. It's not actually a circle. It looks like a circle, but it is an ellipse. It's slightly compressed at the top and bottom. It may not be obvious, but this is not a perfect circle, and this is pretty close to what the moon's path looks like. Almost circular, but not. It's not a perfect circle. It is an ellipse with low eccentricity. Because it has low eccentricity, in a very thin red, I put like a little star here. That little star is the center of the ellipse, and this little black star very close to it is where the Earth is. And again, I did it pretty darn close to exact scale. This is what it actually looks like. I was curious. I wanted to see what's really going on. So you see there's just a little bit of distance. So where is Black Moon Lilith? Where, you know where it is. I just explained where is it? Black Moon Lilith is the point where the moon is farthest from the Earth. It's to the left. This little star that I drew over here on the left is Black Moon Lilith. astronomers simply call it the moon's apogee. I wonder if astronomers might think, boy, those astrologers are weird. Why don't they just call it the moon's apogee instead of Black Moon Lilith? Okay, well, anyway, we call it Black Moon Lilith. Astronomers call it the moon's apogee. In fact, I have a little label here, apogee, an arrow pointing to it, and the opposite point is where the moon's orbit is closest to the Earth, is the perigee. There it is. And by the way, this distance from the middle of the ellipse, where the red star is, to the perigee point is called the semi-major axis. It's the distance to the perigee and apogee from this, not from the Earth, but from the center of the ellipse. And then going the shorter way, this is actually compressed at the top and bottom, is the, I have it over here, the semi-minor axis, which is about 384. These are almost the same because the eccentricity is very small. And so you would have the moon, and from notice I drew a purple arrow here, not from the center of the ellipse, because the Earth is not at the center. The Earth is over here, a little bit off the center of the ellipse, and as astrologers or anybody looking out at the sky, we would say, there's the moon, wherever it happens to be in the path. There it is. And directly to the left, in the way this diagram is drawn, is the Black Moon Lilith. Now, here is the very, very cool thing about Black Moon Lilith is this. Let me say what I just said again. It'll lead to this very, very amazing thing. Is here we are on Earth, this little black star, right? That's the Earth. Where is Black Moon Lilith? The way I've drawn this diagram happens to be to the left. I just organized it that way. So it's to the left. Now, where is the other focus point of the moon's orbit? It's like the shadow Earth, that other Earth point, that other focus point where the Earth could have been. In other words, the Earth, like any object in the sky that has something traveling around it, there are two focal points. Two focal points for that specific object. So for the moon has two focal points. One is the Earth, and one is there's nothing there. Some people call it like a shadow Earth, like a shadowy Earth. It's like a ghost. I've heard people call it like it's a ghost Earth. This other focal point, where is it? It's going to be to the left of the center of the ellipse. So we are on Earth. If I or you point to Black Moon Lilith, we're pointing to the left. We're pointing to the apogee point. We're also pointing to that ghost Earth, that other focal point. So let me give you an analogy to what I'm saying. Suppose when you were born, some planet, say Venus, was conjunct the fixed star Regulus. Regulus is very close to the ecliptic plane, so Venus or any planet, when it's conjunct Regulus, it could be extremely close to it in the sky. And suppose the zodiac longitude is, like almost exactly the same. They're conjunct. Okay, so Venus is conjunct Regulus. But Regulus is light years. How many light years away? Is incredibly far away. And Venus, of course, is hugely closer. But they're in the same direction. So in astrology, we generally ignore how far away things are, right? We just say, oh, Venus is conjunct Regulus. We just point in the direction. We don't pay that much attention to the fact that Regulus is like crazy farther away. And that's what I'm saying here. It's the same exact thing. That ghost Earth, excuse me, or, it's kind of a poetic phrase for it, more specifically, it's just the other focal point of the moon's orbit, that other point that could have been the Earth, but isn't, is in the same direction as the moon's apogee. So there are two ways of saying what Black Moon Lilith is. You can say it's the moon's apogee, correct. You can say it's where the other focal point of the moon's orbit is. That's also correct. So both are true. Now, if Black Moon Lilith has significance astrologically, like other points, like the ascendant or tropical zero Aries or the midheaven or any house cusp, etc., if it has some astrological significance, is it because that point is the moon's apogee? Or is it because that point is the other focal point of the moon's orbit? Or is it both? We don't know. There's no way to separate them out. But the fact that the moon's, the Black Moon Lilith is simultaneously the apogee as well as the other focus point of the moon's orbit, that, quote, ghost Earth, that's pretty cool. It suggests that there's two reasons to suspect why it may be important. And I think it being the other focal point of the moon's orbit, for me personally, that's very intriguing. Okay, but in any case, two reasons why the Black Moon Lilith might be important. Now, the perigee is just the opposite point. So it might also be important. But, one thought that I had before I studied this more carefully is I thought, why are we emphasizing apogee? Why the moon's apogee, the moon's apogee? What about the moon's perigee? It's closer to us. You would think that the moon's perigee is the one we're interested in. But the apogee is also, again, it's where the that shadow Earth would be, that ghost Earth, that other focal point. It would be exactly the same distance from this red star to the left of it as the black star, which is the position of the Earth. It'd be right there. So it does make sense, this emphasis on the moon's apogee, for that reason. So very, very fascinating, the Black Moon Lilith. Okay, let me just read my notes here. Okay, I have covered everything on the notes. I don't think there's anything else I need to say here. It's going on to the next slide. So here I mentioned there are two things that cause Black Moon Lilith's position to change. Oh, no, this is the new topic. Okay, this is where it starts getting interesting. If the only thing involved with the Black Moon's Lilith is what I've told you so far, it would be extremely simple. But there are two things that complicate this. The first one only complicates it a little bit, and the second one makes it much more complicated. Now, I'm at 29 minutes. This is a perfect point to stop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and I will pick up with the next video in this series on what these two things are that make the story of the moon's orbit around the Earth more complicated. And the second one we talk about is going to make a distinction between the mean Lilith and the true Lilith. And we will also get some intuitions about whether true Lilith makes sense or not, as we really understand, or does mean Lilith make sense as we understand what they actually are. Okay, my friends, we'll stop here and continue in the next video in the series. Thank you very much. God bless. Namaste.